Come on in, folks. On behalf of April, John, and Bob, and the family, we are grateful for those of you that were able to be here. It's an unfortunate time that we're in with COVID, and times like this where we need so many people around us, we're limited. But it's so wonderful to have each of you here today, and I know it means so much to the family. Can we take a moment to just invite God's presence with us today? Father, we are here today on a day that we prefer to not be in this place. But we thank you that you are with us. We thank you that you understand our sorrow, the heaviness of our hearts. You know what it's like to go through this mourning process with us. We're just grateful that we have one another to draw comfort from and strength from, but we also have you in our midst. We thank you for that. Father, we pray that your great comforting presence would abide with us, not only in this time that we're together, but in the days to come. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. I just want to share a few scriptures from the Bible to get us started. In the Psalms, the writer of Psalm 119 says, may your unfailing love be my comfort according to your promise. In other words, God's unfailing love is a promise that he makes available to all of us if we will draw near to him. In the New Testament, Paul writes to the believers in Corinth, he says, all praises belong to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, for he is the Father of tender mercy and the God of endless comfort. He always comes alongside us to comfort us in every suffering, so that we can come alongside those who are in any painful trial. We can bring them the same comfort that God has poured out upon us. And then Jesus himself said regarding those who feel loss and grief, he said, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. I just want to share a bit about Chris's life and read the obituary. Chris Kestyn, beloved husband, father, son, brother, and friend, passed away December 19th, 2020 in Fairfax, Virginia, at the age of 53. Chris grew up in the Northern Virginia area, graduating in the last class of Groveton High School in 1985. He then went on to earn his Bachelor of Science in Physical Education in 1990 at West Virginia University and a Master of Arts from the College of Notre Dame of Maryland in 2000. Chris began his career in Calvert County, Maryland, where he taught physical education and served as athletic director at Calvert Middle School from 1990 to 1996. He began teaching in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1996, spending time at Sunrise Valley Elementary School, Langston Hughes Middle School, and the past 18 years at Liberty Middle School. He was a charter staff member of Liberty Middle School, serving as athletic director to open the new school in 2002. He coached women's high school basketball for 30 years in Fairfax County, West Potomac High School, McLean High School, and Oakton High School. The majority of that time, he served as associate head coach for the Oakton women's basketball program. The program won multiple district and regional championships over the years, and the Virginia State title in 2012. He was also head coach of the American Legion Post 1995 baseball team from 1996 to 2005, winning 5 districts tournament titles, District 17 tournament titles, with an overall record of 204 wins, 75 losses, and 1 tie, and had multiple players drafted into the MLB. He was a skilled coach and loving mentor who established countless relationships with athletes that turned into lifelong friendships. He married his best friend, April Garrison, in 1994, and together raised 2 sons, John and Bobby. He dedicated numerous hours to coaching their youth basketball and baseball teams until they reached high school, when he became their biggest fan in the stands. His family was always his first priority. Although he loved all sports, his first love was baseball. So much so that he planned family vacations, Griswold style, around the U.S. based on where MLB stadiums were located and the timing of when they were being closed. He managed to visit every stadium in the U.S. and Canada, old and new, and visit every state in the U.S. except Alaska and Hawaii, which were already being planned, by the way. He was an avid Cincinnati Reds fan until the Washington Nationals came to D.C. As a season ticket holder from day one, Chris enjoyed many opportunities to be part of the Nats, including throwing out the first pitch. He was known for his humorous storytelling and memorable expressions and quotes. Chris was an avid reader, a history buff, music lover, and lifelong learner. Most of all, under his tough exterior, he was a loving, compassionate person who was thoughtful and loyal through and through, and always found ways of letting you know he cared. He leaves behind his wife, 26 years April, sons John, 23, and Bobby, 19, his parents, Don and Jan Kestyn, sister Kim Kestyn, brother Matt Kestyn, in-laws Bill and Dottie Garrison and Karen Garrison, brother-in-law Clayton Garrison, his wife Debbie, and multiple nieces and nephews. We're going to open it up to a time of sharing here in just a moment, but since I have the microphone, I get to go first. One of the things that I appreciate about Chris was his role as a coach. As a coach, he had a passion to help those he coached become better as players and as people, to develop their skills beyond where they presently were. That's what coaches do. Coaches cheer you on and celebrate your victories with you. More significantly, they encourage you and build you up when you're struggling in the game or with the game. They offer a different perspective than you have while you're in the heat of the game. I believe coaches do their greatest work when they instill courage and belief into their players when the game seems to be a total loss. They can teach the greatest lessons through the players' experience of pain and adversity, helping to build their character and helping them to learn from their mistakes. This is how coaches mold players into champions. And this was the kind of coach that Chris was. Every athlete experiences loss. And I think that's the most critical time that a coach can come alongside, help them, build them up, and encourage them. What a great profession that is. I'm going to read a couple of things that were sent and written. This is from Donnie Storms, posted on Facebook. He was one of Chris's students at Calvert Middle School. And he writes, Coach K was my favorite teacher in middle school. I had a really tough time in 7th and 8th grade. And Coach K was one of the few bright spots I had. My mom worked at Calvert Middle with him, and I remember a couple of afternoons he let me hang out with him and play Sim City on the school computer lab. We'd have PE 2 or 3 times a week, and a few of us would rush to get changed into our gym clothes and then go hang out with him in his office, joking around and talking about sports. We always felt welcome there. That's just the kind of teacher he was. He taught me, Will McCready and Josh Weber, how to play fantasy sports and played fantasy basketball with us, even if he did claim Jordan when he came out of retirement before any of us had a chance. He put me on sports teams I had no business being on, soccer and track and field, because he knew I needed something good, and he was able to give it. I loved sports, but they didn't love me back, as I was never particularly athletic. But Coach K would always find a way to recognize my effort and encourage me, even if it was just a good hustle. He could always tell when something was wrong, and he'd take the time to talk to me one-on-one in his office until I felt better. I honestly don't know if I'd have made it through middle school without him. I still get a kick out of thinking about him yelling at us. It was always just your last name, loud and grumpy, and you knew you needed to stop doing whatever dumb thing you were doing. I still have at least one friend who refers to me as Storms 90% of the time. And it's because of Coach K. In college, he emailed my student account, but for whatever reason, my school firewall, or his ISP's firewall, wouldn't let me email back, and it always kicked back to me as undeliverable. We lost touch after that, but I never stopped appreciating him or what he did for me. I messaged him over Facebook a few years ago, but never heard back, which didn't shock me because social media always seemed like the absolute last thing he'd care about. I don't think he'd have been him if he did, so it never bothered me. Coach K was like the grumpy, good-natured, cool as hell older brother I never had. And I'll always have a special place in my heart for him. I'm so sorry to hear about his passing, and I'll miss him. But I know wherever he is, he's kicked back watching college basketball and yelling at some dumbass using their last name. There'll never be another like him. This comes from a college friend, Chris's, John Golden. He writes, I've been blessed to meet and get to know a lot of really good people over the years, and I appreciate all of them. But there's a relationship scale that begins with acquaintance and goes to friend. I'd have to say that most of the people I know are really more acquaintances than they are friends. Chris was my friend. We met 35 years ago at West Virginia University. We were student workers at WVU's rec intramural department. We refereed flag football and basketball games and eventually supervised the other student officials, which meant we spent most weeknights breaking up fights between fraternity guys, or sometimes between our referees. We spent a lot of time sitting around the rec intramural office, laughing it up and doing some remarkably in-depth analyses of WVU's intramural flag football and basketball league standings. Had podcasting existed then, I'm pretty sure we'd have been huge, at least among people following WVU intramurals. We also spent a fair amount of time driving the equipment van back and forth between the flag football fields and the office, deciding which of our referees should work which games and give us the lowest chance of starting a riot. Speaking of starting a riot, I'll never forget the day that Kes nearly started one himself. He had to step in and referee a flag football game, and one of the teams had become kind of hard to deal with. After a score, they celebrated just a little too much for Chris's liking, so he threw a flag for them for being too happy. Looking back, throwing that flag was probably the moment that I knew Kes and I would always be friends. Early in the spring, we'd use some of that hard-earned rec intramural money and go to Cleveland to see the Indians play. You haven't experienced cold if you haven't done a weekend series in Cleveland in early April. We might have had sweatshirts and an extra pair of socks to fight the cold. Those trips with Kes and Hondo and Kirby are some of my favorite memories. Family and work kept both of us pretty busy after we finished school in Morgantown, but we always managed to stay connected. We'd call or text every so often just to catch up. Most of those check-ins usually started and ended with baseball. I absolutely loved getting reports from his spring training tips and summer ballparks tours with April, Johnny, and Bobby. Once we were caught up on life stuff, we always seemed to save enough time to argue about players and managers and how some front office was ruining a club. Some of the best of those came when I told him the Nationals wouldn't win a World Series with Bryce Harper. Even if he might have agreed with me a little bit, he wouldn't say so. We couldn't pass up the chance at a good argument about ball, and I couldn't pass up saying, "I told you so," a few dozen times when the Nationals won. But like I know he was for so many people, Chris was more than just a friend who you could have fun arguing with about baseball. He genuinely cared about people. Several years ago, one of our friends back in Morgantown lost his wife unexpectedly. Knowing that our friend didn't have much support around him, Chris called me and said we needed to get to Morgantown and help our guy. He was right. We met there and helped our buddy at a time when he really needed it the most. A while back, he called me to tell me that he was healing up after heart surgery. He hadn't told me that he was having heart surgery. I worked him over pretty good that day for not telling me ahead of time. He told me he didn't tell me because he knew that I would worry about him and he didn't want me to do that. And then just a couple of weeks ago, he texted me that he was sending me a Christmas present. A few days later, a box showed up with a Hawaiian shirt that's full of flowers, Seattle Mariners logos, and Lou Pinella's face. I texted him, "Best Christmas present ever." He replied, "Just looking out for my boy." I want to thank you, Kes. Thanks for looking out for me and for so many other people. Thanks for all the laughs, the freezing Cleveland trips, the calls and pictures from your ballpark tours, and our texts and calls to argue strategy about a game on TV. I'm really going to miss all those. Most of all, Kes, thank you for being my friend. I'll miss that more than anything. Jason Bour is going to come and just share some thoughts and memories. Jason.
All right. So I wasn't planning on speaking today, but before I got a text from April asking if I'd be interested, I kept hearing this voice in my head, and it was clear as day, Coach Kestyn would say, "Get off my ass and say something today." So here I am. For those who don't know, I'm Jason Bour. I met Coach Kestyn when I was probably 16 years old, little freshman, trying out for Legion Baseball, and for 20 years, he's like my best friend. I'm like my second father. I'd like to share a few stories just to explain the impact that he had on my life and my family's. I can remember going over to his house early on in high school, me and my brother, we just go and crush food. And just years later, they didn't say anything at the time, but then later, April, Coach Kestyn would just give us a hard time. And little did they know we were actually preparing them for John and Bob when they were teenagers. I'll always remember the many nights of playing poker in his basement and sharing Legion stories. I remember Bob just running around in his boxers, never had pants on, just a little toddler. And finally, when he got old enough, him and John, they finally got to play poker with the big boys, and none of us even took it easy on them. That's just how we were. Big brothers too. Before some more Legion games one summer, he would always bring a bag of Arby sandwiches, just stocked, and just knowing that we were going to crush him, but he just kept doing it. That's just the man he was. At the beginning of the 2002 season, he told us that we're going to states before the season even started. And my dad has a bunch of old articles. I found a pretty cool article with Coach Kestyn with his Oakleys around his neck right here from 2002. And he's actually quoted in here saying that he has directions to a state tournament site because we were going to states. He was that confident in us. That's just something that really stuck with me. He really instilled that confidence in us. So I'm always thankful for that.
And you did go to states.
We did go to states that year. The game before we ended up winning, I actually got hit in the face by a fastball. Had to go to the hospital, and I remember Coach Kestyn being able to play with me when I was just laying there, and he's like, I will be at the hospital as soon as the game's over. And I just told him to go win the game, and they did. He cared so much for me and my family, always has. Also, there's a famous quote from Coach Kestyn in another article where he said that we need to make the routine plays under pressure. I remember we wear him out about that quote, and I'm pretty sure he told the newspaper people that just that we would keep making fun of him, and he actually made a shirt that said that on it. So just another famous quote from him that I'll always remember. It was a privilege to play for him, to play for that team. And then at my pre-draft workout, I got to go to Camden Yards, and I remember Coach Kestyn calling and saying I'm going to be there. I don't know how he got into the stadium that day, but I just remember in between my rounds of BP, I had a pretty good day. I hit a few home runs in the left center stands, and as I'm standing to the side of the batting cage, I could vividly see Coach Kestyn running around in the left center stands, just trying to pick up all the home run balls for me. Just classic Coach Kestyn move right there. And then my first year of rookie ball, we were out in, I think, Ogden, Utah. April had a work trip out there, and they planned to come see me on the road. I got so sick, and I couldn't even get out of my bed. He had all plans to come see us, and I was so excited. But instead of he ended up taking care of me there. He took me to the grocery store. He loaded me up on snacks and Gatorade. He even got like a cooler for us because the minor league hotel we stayed in didn't even have a refrigerator then. So honestly, and even my roommate was sick too, and he took care of us and he really saved us. Just another amazing story from my time with Coach Kestyn. If I was ever going through a tough time with the plate, I'd get a call, and as soon as I saw his name, I know he was going to pump me up with some stats from Legion ball, and sure enough, he would. Tell me the game I hit 4 home runs, or how we won all these games. Just an amazing coach, amazing father. Every year he'd come visit me at wherever I was playing. If I was, we were back down in Tampa. I remember eating at the King of French Toast with him for breakfast. I remember having fish with him on the beach. And for some reason, he always knew all the local spots anywhere I played. We could be in the middle of nowhere. He'd say, "I'm taking you to this place." I don't know how he did it, but he knew all the hot spots. I'm thankful for those memories with him. The only request he had from me every year was just to give him one of our BP Flex Fit hats. So that I was always so happy when I got him one and take it home to him. And he'd also say if the Oakley rep was around, he wanted me to get him some fresh lenses or fresh Oakleys. So after the season, if I went, he was always so excited to get those new Oakleys. He was there for my wedding. He came up to see my kids when we visited. He always loved when he came over and played. He was down on the ground with them even after his heart surgery. I remember April holding our little babies, bringing down toys. Coach Kestyn would, whenever we played in Potomac, I remember he called me and said, hey, you want to get some extra batting practice in? I was struggling hitting off a lefty. He met me at the field and threw me extra batting practice. Just, I mean, an amazing man. I'm thankful to have got so close to him and his family. I'm grateful I got to watch Bob and John grow up. When I talked to him, he'd always brag to me about you guys. I'm thankful to be a part of that. Every time we did our calls, he would always tell me to give my wife Elise and our kids a hug and a kiss from him. So my ask today is that you would give your loved ones a hug and a kiss for Coach Kestyn. I'm gonna miss seeing his name pop up on my phone, even all the butt dials. But just what an amazing man. I'm thankful to have been a part of his life and you guys' lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I'd like to invite Brian Schur, who worked with Chris. Brian?
Known Chris a long time. I just remember I was thinking about this, and the first time I met Chris, it's funny. I was working at Twain with Matt, and so I knew him and I hung out with him, so I knew a little bit about Chris. And I go to my first department chair meeting. This is in 2000, year 2000, I think. And we're sitting there. There's probably 15 or 20 of us, and I didn't know which one was him. I had no idea. And I'm sitting there 15, 20 minutes wondering who he is. And all of a sudden, the door busts open and like Kramer, this guy all disheveled and like grumping about traffic and all this stuff. And then he sits right next to me. He sits down right next to me. Little did I know that was my introduction to Chris. Years later, 3 years later to be exact, he came to me at a department chair meeting and said, I know you live in Manassas. Why don't you come to Liberty to be with me and hang out and be a teacher at Liberty? And so I took him up on that, and I'm thankful every day that I did. Thankful for our Liberty family and for being great friends with Chris over these years. Chris was well respected and well known by everybody at Liberty. He was always present. He was always that big voice moving through the halls and showing up in your class when you least expect it, and just being all over the place. You never knew when you'd see him. He was a huge personality, and he was just such a big part of the school, and we're going to miss him terribly. The thing about Kestyn is he never let the subject control what he was going to teach kids. From an educator's perspective, I learned so much from him. He is really my mentor when it comes to teaching. He taught me that nothing's more important than getting these kids to a certain level so they're successful in life. It wasn't about the curriculum at middle school. That was a sidebar. It was about the other things. He wanted kids to be self-sufficient and resilient. Okay? He wanted kids to have discipline. And he wanted kids to give the maximum effort. There's some funny stories with these too. The self-sufficiency and resilient thing. I walked into his classroom a few years ago, and Mr. Lorenz will attest to this. We go in there, and on his wall behind him, he's a whiteboard. He's sitting at his help desk, and he has a Y, an N, and a YP on this board. I don't know what in the heck is that. And kids would come to him and ask him a question. He's doing his work, and if it was just a simple yes or no answer, he would just point at the Y, point in the middle. Like, what is the YP? The kid would come up with a question, but it was something Chris would know that kid should know how to answer himself. And he refused to spoon feed kids stuff. That's when he would point at the YP. That meant your problem. That meant figure it out. And it wasn't just their problem. He brought kids to lunch. He brought kids after school if they needed help. He made it his problem to fix their problem. So it wasn't just that. And when they got it, one of his classic things every time, when a kid would get something, he would automatically go, ding, ding. All of you probably remember that. As far as discipline, Chris had a way with kids. There's certain kids that he just had a way with that the rest of us did not. There were times, and he'd probably kill me for this, but there were times where Laura Bellis and I in 7th grade at the end of the year, we'd be like, that kid needs Chris next year. That kid needs Chris next year. And we would go to guidance and we would go to the counselors and be like, hey, make sure Chris gets this guy next year or this girl next year, no matter who it is. And they would. And what we called it was Kestynizing. He had a way to make relationships with kids when kids didn't even want to have a relationship with him that transferred later on. He had a way of getting to know them and getting them to be part of who he was, of just how he was. I don't know how to explain it but that, but those kids, he had kids come back year after year and thank him for the things he did for him in middle school that prepared him for later in life. I thought that was just an amazing part of him. And effort. He would not put up with this. If you did not put forth your best effort, he did not handle that very well. That was the one thing. He made sure kids were putting forth their effort. Okay, and one of the famous things is we have these cardio watches that we wear all the time, and it gives kids good workouts. They wear these watches around, and if some of them aren't doing very well, he pulls out a bike, pops it right down beside him. I'm going to make sure you do well. I'm going to make sure you put this effort forth, because he wasn't going to let people fail. He put them on that bike, and he'd continue to check their watches throughout the thing until they were successful. And he made them put that effort forth that a lot of people wouldn't do. As far as friendships go, Chris amazed me with that too. He had this enormous circle of friends that I was very, very actually envious of. He would call people, like I kind of lose a track of people over time. I'm sure a lot of people do. But Chris would. Chris, if he knew you 20 years ago, he was keeping in touch with you. He would call people. I mean, guy we talked with the first 2 years I was there, he would call him, be like, I talked to Desiree the other day, who I hadn't seen in 15 years. You know, but he kept touch with all these people throughout his life. And I found that to be an amazing trait. It's very hard to do. Jeff and I would always be in the class, in our office. We'd walk in the morning, and there'd be some little gift just sitting on our desk. We always knew it was Chris that left it. It was just something. It could be a t-shirt. It could be a little mug. It could be anything, but it was, you know, when Strasburg had his first opening day, and Chris knew I'd been dying to get tickets for this. He got a code, and he immediately came to me and gave me these tickets, and I got these great seats behind third base, and I was like, Chris, do you want them? These are better seats than the ones you've got. And he goes, no, you take them. And also, I want to sit with my family. And you all were that day too. It really was kind of like a big brother to me. I really looked up to him, and I went to him with advice on all kinds of different things, as I know a lot of people did. He always gave the greatest advice because he was a thinker. He thought things through. He was intellectual. He was smart. He was all of it. And if you ever wanted advice from him, you knew you were going to get advice. It might not be what you wanted, but you were going to get good advice from Chris. As far as family. Chris knew that living life was about making memories with the ones he loves. We sat in that office so many times, and all I would see is him planning this yearly trip with April and the boys. And it would be starting literally like we go back to school now. And he would plan it for months. He would save Coke caps. He would use credit card points. He would plan all the stuff out. And we would go through stuff, and I'd look up stuff on sites, and he'd look up on sites. We'd find all these different things, and I kind of lived vicariously through him. He made so many memories through his life that most people don't get a chance to in such a short time. Above all most things, he was a family man. He was the epitome of a family man. The spring training trips that he got to take with you guys, he loved those, especially because that was sometimes the only time he got individually with someone yet. And he really appreciated those. And he would come back with all kinds of stories about what you guys did, all that. But your husband, your father, your son, your brother, and our friend was a great man. And as we all are, I'm so thankful for him to have been a part of my life. Chris, know this, you will be greatly missed, and your life work will echo on. Rest easy, friend. And as we always ended our phone calls, later, brother.
Thank you, Brian. Bob, John, Matt, if you're here. I'm gonna let you guys come up together and take your time to share your thoughts and memories.
All right, so way dehydrated from crying. This might be a little bit long, but how do you, when I was writing this, I was like, how can you do this? How do people do this? How are you encapsulating my entire lifetime, basically, into 5 minutes? Very hard to do, so this is a little bit longer than 5. All right. In late 1967, Chris's parents, Janice and Donnie, packed him up and made the long trek from the mountains of Montana to the East Coast. The Department of Transportation had sent the family to the DC region, Maryland specifically, but that was only a temporary stop. From 1967 to 1972, the new family bounced from Maryland to Jackson, Mississippi, then back north to Providence, Rhode Island, a stone's throw away from their home town of Greenfield in western Massachusetts. But alas, Uncle Sam had them on the move again after that, and the family settled at 2505 Schooley Drive in 1972. The story of Schooley D started before I was around, but our lives were driven by the world surrounding that small house on half an acre with the biggest oak tree I've ever seen towering in the backyard. A nice quiet dead-end street with some woods behind it, backyard for exploring, and a church at the end of the road with a huge churchyard out back that became our neighborhood's personal football field. My sister Kim came along in 1969, and then I surprised everyone with my appearance in 1973. By that time, Chris was 6 years old and well on his way to developing that competitive nature that we all know he had. This is where I come into the picture. Being Chris's little brother wasn't easy. Even at a young age, he was ruthless at all games. Like, who is cutthroat at Uno? Chris Kestyn. Who wanted to bankrupt me 14 times in Monopoly? Chris Kestyn. Who wanted to beat me 300 times in a row in Magic versus Bird on the first Nintendo? Chris Kestyn. Who thought the game of life, literally and figuratively, meant that he won daily? Chris Kestyn. The epic hide and seek games we had in the neighborhood with the likes of Danny, Mark, and Eric Swain, Hope McMaster, and Cindy, Greg, Hope and Mac McMaster, excuse me, Cindy, Greg, and Rhonda Lane, James Demmel, Vance Ayers, Danny Case, and Jerry Roper, just to name a few. The same set of folks also had snowball games, football games in the churchyard, and King of the Mountain and snowball battles up and down the street during snowstorm. Or maybe it was just a simple one-on-one basketball game or wiffle ball game in our driveway, in the road out front of the Lane's front yard. When we played football, Eric Swain and I were always the youngest players on the team, and Eric shared with me a few days ago that Chris always went that extra length to run a play or two just for Eric when he was on his team, just to make sure that he felt included on the team. I've spoken to so many people and read so many comments this past week that echo that sentiment. He didn't want people to always know, of course not, Chris, but he was always working to help someone, whether it be with a positive word or running to get a Slurpee at 7-Eleven with a colleague, just to get some one-to-one time. Or maybe running that certain player for a game, play for a player once every game, just to make sure they were part of the team. For some time growing up, I wasn't sure if I was on his team or not. I remember a few wrestling matches that turned heavy-handed in our indoor football games, which we still talk about often and reminisce about, that left me seeing stars for real from a couple of hard hits. And also at least one broken wall that is still, I look at that scene in their house still to this day, where I got trucked into the wall when mom and dad were out at an adult party. But at one point, I finally got bigger and I aged. I started winning the indoor football games. He started getting trucked. And I'd win a few board games here and there, or Uno, or maybe even win 3 or 4 Bird versus Magic games in a row. And over time, I gained some respect. I never gave up. I would get super frustrated with losing. Whew. Mom and Dad can attest to that. But he was teaching me how not to give up, even way back then. As our neighborhood families grew up, the games eventually ended, but Chris was full throttle in the sports world. Swimming, basketball, baseball, obviously football, and even the Boy Scouts brought out his competitive spirit. I remember him really, really working on the race cars.
Oh.
Through all the different sports, the theme was always the same: win. We grew up with the Twings and played sports with the Farmers and the Donahues and the Apollos and the Lukes. We went to Little Hunting Park pool meets and saw the Smiths and the Van Horns. But it was Chris's friendship with Kenny Farmer that catapulted his coaching and probably teaching career. Kenny was my baseball coach in high school, and I remember fondly talking baseball with Chris and him when I was a teenager and thinking, wow, they both know this game inside and out. I certainly didn't know it. I wonder if he did, but Kenny was prepping him for the coach and teacher that he would become. Chris headed to WVU and made lasting friendships and had numerous road trips with Hondo, that's Bruce Brubaker, his boss and friend at Campus Recreation, and friends John Golden, Terry Powell, Big Hair Mayor, Mary Mallory, Stacy Deering, Don Jones, and Laura Donor. Chris's relationship with Bruce and John was especially close. I would guess the total number of inside jokes between those guys would number in the upper hundreds or thousands. Those are the memories that will live forever between them. Like so many of us who have nicknames from Chris, my nickname was Hopper. Why? Why Hopper? Well, because I jumped up and down once ridiculously when I made a golf shot up in Greenfield at the par 3. One time I think I parred, and I was just ecstatic because I was 13 years old or 12. Well, my nickname was Hopper from then on. I ended up following Chris at WVU, albeit years apart. Bruce was an establishment of his own there when I arrived. Chris was back in Virginia teaching by this time, but he made sure that Hopper was taken care of. That out? I was immediately and without question employed by Bruce, and the reality was I had a special spot because of Chris. I would always be the first on the list for extra hours, which was actually, we were making like $4.35 an hour, so it's no joke, like I needed to. I was always on the front of the list for extra hours, or free gear, which was more important, and which Chris Kestyn was a huge fan of, or just the inside track for my own inside jokes with Bruce, which we had a million. I had a rough beginning of my freshman year, though. I was a homesick mama's boy who had an exchange student roommate who didn't speak English. But I remember Chris calling my dorm room landline and talking me through it. Work every day. Get out of the dorm room. Meet people. You've got this. He was right. I toughed it out, but more importantly, I realized that we had graduated to a different relationship. It wasn't about destroying me in Monopoly anymore. It was about helping me become a man. As I matured into my 20s and 30s, Chris and I bonded with our mutual love of sports and collectibles and our own inside jokes, usually recycled at every Thanksgiving and Christmas, usually picking on my sister and my mom, who we dearly love. Sometimes brutally, but always lovingly. But we graduated to often talking about how I could expand our Bucky's, my grandmother's coffee cake business, or how I could maximize my time, you would say, and expand my side job lawn business. He always thought he was right, and most of the time he probably was. I'll always be stubborn, no damn it. But at this point, he had become a true teacher, coach, and father. The advice was sound. Brian reminded you guys of that. The tone was caring. There was no more competition. Before I even bought my house, he was in my ear about refinancing the loan. Who does that? Over the years, I was like in pre-approval. Over the years, I've gone on a couple of big Pearl Jam trips. After I got back, I'd always get a call from Chris asking what posters I needed from the shows because they would sell out. I'm like, I'm at the show and I still can't get a poster. He'd be like, I got it, I'm on it. Or which set list shirts you should be looking for. Somewhere in his office, April, there's a list scribbled down of all those things. And he marked off a few of them. He was always doing something seemingly small to help someone or make them feel good about themselves. He came through. He found several set list shirts that were sold out of shows and sparse availability on eBay. I don't know how I found that shirt. My Nation Boy Ric Flair obsession was always supported by Chris. For a while in the 90s, I actually thought I was Ric Flair. I used to do the strut up at WVU, woo, you know what I mean? And it was a show. But he actually he embraced it. Chris jumped on the opportunity. And soon I was receiving signed posters, a signed robe, bobbleheads. Once the can was opened, Chris Kestyn would search for the deal. And this is the important part. It didn't have to be a good deal. It was just something that you would enjoy and appreciate. The Orioles. I never defected. Chris loved the Cincinnati Reds until the Nats came to town, but I grew up with the Orioles as my team. They've stunk for so long, but the Eddie Murray, Cal Ripken years were my childhood. When Cal retired, my dad was well beyond the need or want to go to another baseball game. But Chris insisted that we go one more time, making those memories. We went to one of his last games and had a great time in Camden Yards up in nosebleed because everybody was trying to go because it was one of his last games. But we didn't care. Just like we had gone 20 years earlier at Memorial Stadium, we got to relive that again. He was stubborn and nostalgic, knew that we needed to go for that game to have that one more experience. Whew, so what do all these anecdotes add up to? They try and sum up in a few minutes what was a lifetime of brotherhood. We could nudge each other or look at each other a certain way and just know what was implied. We could push each other's buttons and needle each other endlessly, but it was more fun to do it to others. The last 25 years, in fact, were not spent fighting anymore. We were just brothers. I got to see the father and the husband that he became. Chris's death is so unfair for us all, but especially April, Johnny, and Bobby. Chris planned those family trips for months and made sure that his boys maximized their experience at every stop. Not many kids get to drive across the country on multiple routes, multiple times. Plus, he must have known all the greatest places to eat in every single town. His dedication to his boys shows the men that they are becoming. I know that he would be proud of them today for handling his death with such dignity. And the men that they become will also reflect on the parents who raised Chris. He could be a difficult child and a difficult teenager, but our parents dug in and tried and tried and tried. I told them this week or last week that they had absolutely nothing to regret in the way they raised us, and the proof is in the outpouring of love that has been shown for Chris. The hundreds of little things that he did on a daily basis to make people's lives better. How do you find the time to do all that? Show how compassionate and caring he had become. The hundreds of examples I've read and heard about him doing those little things made me smile and cry because it exposes what I thought that only the inner circle knew. Chris went out of his way to impact your life. As we all aged, he also took the reins as the older brother and made sure that my parents' needs were always taken care of, a role he wanted to undertake. My parents aren't speaking today and asked me just to simply tell you all that they love Chris immensely and will miss him dearly in their daily lives. Although Chris's life has ended way too soon, he will live on in all of us who are recipients of his kind acts. The next time you stop by someone's desk or text someone out of the blue, or buy someone their favorite candy or unique collectible and make their day, maybe you did it because Chris Kestyn made your day once. That'll be the best form of remembrance to me. Live like Chris Kestyn and try to win the game of life every day. I'll miss Chris eternally, and I'll be expecting that call that won't come. What are you doing? What are you doing? That was everything for my entire lifetime. Hello, what are you doing? They never changed it up, but that was Chris. Sorry, I lost my place now. The end of the page, that's why. I'll miss Chris eternally, and I'll be expecting that call that won't come, but I'll go on knowing that he had evolved into a great husband, great father, great brother, and a great son. I also know that right about now, you'd be exasperated. Bobby might want to show you what that looks like. Rubbing his temple, looking around, wondering to no one, when will this end? So let's do that. I love you, Chris. I'll be here for the boys and April and anything they need from Uncle Hop. And as Ric Flair would say, Chris, you'll be often imitated, but never duplicated. Woo!
speech. There's so much to write about, so eventually I just stopped to save the rest of you. So I'll just start. Christopher Kestyn was a man with a seemingly grumpy exterior and a seriously loving interior. And although he loved to complain about various things in life, he truly enjoyed it. He had a loving family wherever he went, whether that be Calvert, Liberty, Oakton, or Fairfax, where he worked every day doing what he loved. As a child, I always asked him why he loved what he did. His answer was always, I get to play games every day. Who doesn't like that? And for a while, I thought this meant that he was a teacher only for himself, and that students weren't a factor for choosing the path he did. However, this isn't the case. Over the course of my life, I've witnessed thousands of people who have had theirs changed for the better because of my father. Now stay with me, but while writing this speech, I tried to calculate the number of students and players he's interacted with in some way with staggering results. If you take the average number of players, number of teams, and years coaching, plus all the students he's taught over the years, give or take a few 100, accounting for error, he impacted roughly 7,500 kids over his 30 plus years of teaching and coaching. Even more insane is that's just the kids. That estimate doesn't include the adults he's affected, meaning his influence spreads farther than students and coworkers, but also to the people they've interacted with as a domino effect. Through his impact, he taught his students, players, and kids to never give up, never be afraid, and never make the same mistake twice. Not only did my father influence them, but he made lifelong friends with the people he coached and taught. In his office, he has an entire wall of Little League team pictures, newspaper clippings, and framed letters from players and students, because any success of theirs meant that he succeeded in his goal of making their life better. My dad understood the importance of growing up and attempted and succeeded to make their life better, even if he had to yell to get the message across. And in all honesty, getting yelled at sucks sometimes. And after all the emotions passed, him and I would sit down together and have a conversation, afterwards realizing that he did it out of love and care. And the same goes for all the other athletes he coached, or the students he taught. He saw the best in all of us, rooted for his players as much as his own sons. So much so he would yell at them too when they messed up. Even with Dad's energetic and intense coaching style, many previous players of his have reached out to me and told me that although my father only coached them for a year or two, he was their favorite coach. We would be in the fourth quarter of a travel game, and he'd have steam coming out of his ears, yelling at us to run faster, play harder, and stop turning our socks yellow with piss. He was a man of many quotes, even in the basketball game, reciting, Vince Lombardi once said, fatigue makes cowards of us all, and that echoed through us the entire game. Well, my dad, I have a quote for you. As President Bartlett said in his favorite show, The West Wing, never doubt that a small group of individuals can change the world. And that's exactly what he was, a thoughtful individual. Sorry, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful individuals can change the world. And that's what he was, a thoughtful individual. And my dad did change the world in his own right through what he believed was important. And in doing so, truly, he made an impact. He always talked about visiting an Iowa football game, and not for the reason you would expect. There's a tradition called the Iowa Wave, where at the end of the first quarter, every person in the stadium would wave at the University of Iowa's Steed Family Children's Hospital, where the hospital has a press box overlooking the stadium. And the hospitalized children would witness an ocean of waving hands back at them. You see, my dad may have been a grump, but he loved kids. So much so his dream retirement job was to be a T-ball coach, coaching 6-year-olds in the game he loved until he couldn't any longer, sitting on a bucket, teaching them phrases like alligator mouth step on second to help them grasp how to play the game. He also enjoyed holidays like Halloween because he got to see all the kids dressed up in their costumes and always gave out king-size Snickers bars, never fun size. Even while cursing under his breath about the deck he's been constructing for 4 years straight, he made the time to talk to our neighbors' little girls and make them laugh, giggle, and enjoy talking to Mr. Chris. And although his time on earth was cut short, his legacy will live on through me, my family, and all the people he's impacted through his life. His legacy will carry on for generations as they teach their kids how to break a press or how to throw a changeup. Although he gave great gifts with the same thoughtfulness as the knowledge he passed on, the greatest gift I've ever received was being his son. Most of the speech is how he impacted others. However, this is my dad we're talking about, the man who made me who I am today. And my favorite and most cherished memory is when I broke the indoor shot put record at Fairfax. As soon as the ball hit over the line, the entire arena filled with the boom of my father's voice. His proud screams echoed through the building, silencing even the starting guns. I already knew he was proud of me, but when I got to see him and hug him and feel the emotions in him, I knew I would never forget that day. And to relax a little bit, a funnier anecdote is when I was competing at the state meet for discus. I was on my last throw, and I was in 4th or 5th place. On the last throw, I clutched second to win runner-up at the state. And when I went to look for my dad, I couldn't find him anywhere. Out from behind a tree, he came and hugged me. He hid because he was so nervous he couldn't watch. He talked to my high school throwing coach, who apparently did the same. And when they realized they both hid from my last throw, they laughed, and they told us about it. He wanted me to succeed so badly that he had to hide. He was truly my greatest supporter. But there is no measure of how much he impacted my life. From the first bike ride to my first car drive with him, he was there. And things will be different now. But the lessons he has taught me will forever be carried on for every Kestyn to come. And I may be biased, but he is the best dad you could ask for. He's there when you need a hug and when you need to be called a moron to get set straight. He knew everything as well, even if he didn't. And he was a Renaissance man of insane proportions that lived a life to the same degree. Here are a few things I'll miss about my dad. I won't be able to visit the last 2 states with him on family vacations. I won't be able to tell him about my new maxes after lifting. And I won't be able to go over to him and bother him when he's crying over a Netflix movie. But he will still be with me. I love making my dad proud. I love seeing the smile on his face when I accomplish something, even the smallest little thing. I love calling him bro and dog and him pretending not to like it. He may be gone, but he will be watching over us, smiling down when I throw my first discus past 50 meters and picking me back up when I fail my next clean at 400 pounds. He is not gone. He is coaching us from above. I'll leave you with these 2 quotes from my dad's favorite Star Trek Next Generation's captain, Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. The first being, it is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness, that is life. Live like Chris would have, to the fullest, for yourself and for others. He never liked change or talking of death, so let us not dwell on the fact that he is physically gone, and instead remember him in the past and live through him in the future. And the second quote being, seize the time, live now. Make now always the most precious time. Now will never come again. And as Dad lived, I live for him. I live for you, Dad. I will never give up. I will never be afraid. And I can't say that I'll never make the same mistake twice, but I can promise to you that I'll always try and learn from him. I love you, Dad.
Good job.
So these are some things that I wanted to tell my father, but for some odd reason, I guess I just never got the opportunity to tell him. These are the lessons that I've learned from my father. I couldn't seem to figure out how to phrase this when I was thinking of what to say. I'm no journalism major. I'm not an author. I'm not a lyricist by any means. But when I was a young boy, about 5th grade, I told him that I would never need to write a paper. When I grow up, it will do with nothing that I pertain to with any future parts of my life. I now know that I'm wrong. My father did this thing I would call being a Hollywood father. He would always want to say the one-liners that the fathers tell their sons in the movies, just so that changes the main character's point of view. And how he represented himself to me was in many different ways. To me, my father boiled his lessons and ideas down into 5 different categories: coach, hero, teacher, mentor, and father. As a coach, my father taught me that when you aren't putting in the work for what you want, there is someone else out there who is. Since then, I've always tried to be the person who outworks the rest of the people nearby me and far away from me. He's also proceeded to tell me that I'm a great starter. I need to work on being a better closer, and I would tell him that I am a great closer and that he was wrong. As a hero, he would always be there for me when no one else was. Our neighborhood growing up, I didn't have a lot of kids my age when I was little. So he would lightsaber battle me in the house as a boy because he knew I was alone. He would put me in the wagon with him when he would mow the lawn because he knew I was bored and alone. He'd buy us squirt guns and Nerf guns that would end up messing the house and making my mom upset. But he knew I was bored and I didn't have anything to do and no one to play with. He would take me out of school and he'd bring me to the movies and the President's Club at National Park. And then he would ask me, who does your biggest fan need to be? And I would tell him, you are my biggest fan. And he said, it should not be me, because one day I will not be here to be your biggest fan. I told him, no, you are wrong. As a teacher, he taught me everything about the world and mostly about people. He told me to be a leader and not a follower, and would tell me smart people like us are here to help the people who say they need help and the ones who don't say they need help. I told him it wasn't fair that smart people need to go back and help those who can't help themselves. And it wasn't our job to do so. I was wrong. As a mentor, he would tell me if it was easy, everybody would do it. As the reason behind why I need to persevere through and push through my problems that I've been dealt. I would always tell them that no matter the problem, there is always a workaround, and I will always find that workaround. So therefore, everything should be easy for me. Now reading this aloud to my family and friends, once again, I was wrong. As a father, there were more lessons than I can remember, but there is one that is most impactful to me. This may have been something that my father might have brushed off at the time that he told me, but knowing him and knowing me, he probably still remembers. There was a time that we went to spring training and we were eating in the morning at a Waffle House. He loves Waffle House and I love Waffle House too. I would always get the eggs and I'd always get the biggest meal and he'd always wonder how I ate all the food. And there was an old man at a booth next to a newspaper stand. He had just finished his meal and he paid for his check and he left a tip on the table. He proceeded to get up and leave the restaurant and walk out to his truck. The truck was a slightly old, rusted, crimson red Ford F-150. And outside the window, he began to feel for his pockets and search for his keys. He walks back inside and talks to the waitress and asks if she's seen them, and she tells him no. He then walks back inside and then out again about 8 more times before he sat down and started to sob to himself and cry. I then told my father, Dad, I wish the old man could have the view that I have so that he can see that he dropped his keys under the newspaper stand. My father told me, son, you have 2 choices. You can sit here and you can finish your eggs and we can get up and we can go leave the stadium. Or you can choose the other option and use what you know to be the change that you want to have happen in the world. As a child, there was a day that I did not wear my glasses to school because I was told by some peers that they make me look childish. And all I wanted to be was a man. I then asked my father, how do I know when I'm actually a man, Dad? And he told me, I don't know when I became a man, but I realized that when you become a man, you deal with things that you don't want to do. You admit to things that you'd rather not, even if there's no benefit to yourself. I don't want to be here. I don't want to read the speech, but I'm here because I love you, Dad. I can tell you now, even if it was too late, that you were right the whole time. And I'm thinking I'm starting to understand what you told me.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to share a poem and then close. I had something prepared, but I don't really think I'm going to go that route, so bear with me just a few more minutes. This poem was given to me by April to read, and it's entitled Game Called by Grantland Rice. Game called. Across the field of play, the dusk has come, the hour is late. The fight is done, and lost or won. The player files out through the gate. The tumult dies, the cheer is hushed, the stands are bare, the park is still. But through the night, there shines the light, home beyond the silent hill. Game call, where in the golden light the bugle rolled the reveille. The shadows creep where night falls deep, and taps is called the end of play. The game is done. The score is in, the final cheer and jeer pass. But in the night beyond the fight, the player finds his rest at last. Game called. Upon the field of life, the darkness gathers far and wide. The dream is done. The score is spun. It stands forever in the guide. Nor victory, nor yet defeat, is chalked against the player's name. But down the roll, the final scroll shows only how he played the game. This is a tough day. A tough day. As it's already been said more than once, a life that was ended too soon and abrupt, unexpected, and it feels very unfair. And you're right, it is unfair. Death is the great enemy of the human race. Yet the truth is, we all will be there one day. I love all the things that have been shared, and everyone did such an incredible job sharing their thoughts. What I was standing there thinking is that even though Chris isn't with us physically anymore, he's still teaching us. He's taught you a lot, and we can continue to share that knowledge to help others become better than where they're at, or become better than who they might be. We can see the potential that sometimes only the coach can see. Sometimes the players, it's hard for them to see the potential. They get frustrated with one another, especially when that one player can't seem to get things together. That'd probably be me. But the coach knows how to help them and guide them and direct them. And a thought that hit me this morning, and I want to turn things to eternity and a spiritual point of view for just a moment. My goal isn't to take advantage of this grief and sorrow, but in this time that we have, God has created life and He's created each one of us. And so many times we live our lives in such hurriedness and we fill it with so many things, and we don't stop to realize and appreciate all that God the Creator has done for us. And I just want to help us get our thoughts directed to Him. And in the role that Chris played as coach, I hadn't thought of God this way before this morning. But in a way, He's the great coach of all. He's there to see us through the difficulties and adversities of life. He understands, He has that perspective that none of us have to help us get through the adversity and the challenge and the sorrow and grief that we're presently feeling. Right now, it doesn't feel like we can go on. Now, how are we going to get through another day, another week, another month? What's down the road? We don't know. We don't understand. It feels so overwhelming. That's why death is our great enemy. But God wants us to know that He is there with us. As a pastor, I think one of the greatest things that I've learned to appreciate about God is throughout the Bible, His promise that I will never leave you and I'll never forsake you. You have a good friend like that? For you, some of you, Chris was that friend. For all of you, maybe he was that friend. He was always there. But Chris is limited. God isn't. And He can be with us through any circumstance or situation. And I want you to know today that God, your Creator, loves you with a fierce, fierce love. And He's there for you. And when it feels overwhelming, you may say, but I'm not a church-going man or woman. That's okay, God. God's not really impressed with that anyway. What impresses God is a heart that turns to Him in a moment where it feels broken, unable to cope. He'll be there for you. He'll be there for you. And one of the beautiful things about this room, and this room represents such a small number of people that Chris impacted with his life. But us as a group, we form a community, and we're all bonded around that man, Chris Kestyn. And in the days ahead, when we're struggling, begin to remember him and share the things that were shared today. You notice we were able to laugh about things. That's the incredible thing, that even in the midst of grief, we can remember someone, and we can remember those moments and situations that will bring us joy, and we do that. It helps counter the heaviness of the sorrow. I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to continue to share those stories with each other. So to honor God and encourage them with those stories. In times like this, I know from experience as a pastor, a lot of people gather around us in that short time right after a loved one's death. But as life goes on, we all continue on. And April, Bob, John, you're going to always have people there that love you, but it's going to sometimes feel like people have moved on and left you behind. Know that we haven't done that. We love you. We're not leaving you behind. But life continues to go forward, and we all have to move forward with it. And in the grief process, there's a lot of things that are going to happen. It's going to be a lot of emotions you have to deal with. Well, I want to encourage you to deal with them. Don't try to stuff it down and act like it's not there. Because when we do that, it reminds me of when I was a kid or even an adult. Taking those beach balls you blow up, you shove them under the water, whether you're in the pool or especially at the ocean when the waves are hitting you. You get that under there and you pin it between your knees and you try to ride it. And I don't know about you, I can't do it for very long because the wave comes and hits me and knocks me over. And that's what our emotions can do to us if we try to stuff it down. We can't ride it for long. All of a sudden, we lose our balance. That ball comes bursting out of the water and we fall in. So what I'm just simply trying to say is, if you have an opportunity that you have someone you can trust and talk to about how you're feeling. And it's ironic I say this because I process everything by myself. I'm not one that goes running to people to help me process it. And if you're like me, I just want to encourage you, find that person you can trust and just say, I'm having a crappy day. And hopefully they'll just listen. And for those of you, if they come to you, it's not the time, it's not our place to start giving advice. It's just that time to listen, to share that loss with them. That's what I encourage you to do. Same with mom and dad, the family. This isn't easy. 2 weeks ago, who of us here would think we'd be standing in this room doing this today? There wasn't even a thought. It didn't register on the radar. Yeah, here we are. So one final thing I want to share is that I think what I heard through the testimonies about Chris was that he was a man that appreciated relationships. And in life, we can try to accomplish so many things. We try to grab a hold of so many things, and it's things. And, they can bring some happiness for a season. But, at the end of life, when we're on our deathbed, we're not going to lay there and say, oh, man, I wish I'd had another day to go to the office and make some more money. I wish I'd, been able to do this or that. What happens with every person that I've ever known is, I wish I'd had more time with my family, my friends, those people close to me that are meaningful to me. And that's what life's about, folks. It's about the relationships and being together. And like we shared about Chris, he had a knack for keeping in touch with people over the years. It's something I can envy about him. I've not been good about that. Being a military kid, moving all the time, you move on, you have some friends that you kind of stay in touch with, but this is a time to just, not just remember Chris, but even look at our own lives, reflect and evaluate, just say, what adjustments can I and do I need to make to become a better person, to impact people in a better way in my life? That's all I got. So if you would, just bow your heads and we're just gonna end with prayer. Father, I thank you so much that you are with us here in this moment. We're not alone. You haven't forgotten us. Even though our hearts are broken, we're struggling through this loss. We have all these emotions that surround it, that are accompanied with it. I just ask you on behalf of everyone in this room and anyone that's listening online, just help us, God, through this difficult moment. Give us the strength we need, and may we find the comfort that we need to heal and to continue to move forward with life. I'm grateful that you're with us. I'm thankful, Lord, for the man we know as Chris Kestyn. And I just pray that in a special way, God, that you'd surround April and John and Bob, Chris's family, those that were really close to him. Mend the brokenness that they feel. Lord, we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. This concludes our service. That was good. That was good. Maybe a little. You did an awesome job. Like I said. No, absolutely. It's not really, you can't.